In 2009, an Airbus A320 carrying 155 people lost both engines less than a minute after takeoff. The pilot had less than 3 minutes to make a decision. No runway in reach, not enough altitude, no obvious options. He landed the plane on a river. Everyone survived. And that's not even the most incredible case on this list. Today, you're going to see 10 unbelievable landings that defied every probability and ended in ways nobody saw coming. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, because this is exactly the kind of content we bring you every week. And if you already know the channel, drop a like before we continue. It helps a ton and takes 2 seconds. Now let's get into the list. Number 10. The landing on the Hudson River. Few people imagine that a simple run-in with birds could put an entire aircraft at risk. But that's exactly what happened to U.S. Airways Flight 1549, an Airbus A320 that had just left LaGuardia Airport in New York. Less than a minute after takeoff, the aircraft flew straight into a flock of Canada geese. The impact was enough to knock out both engines at once, a double failure aviation manuals describe as extremely rare. Within seconds, passengers saw flames through the windows and felt the plane losing altitude at an alarming rate. With no time to turn back to the airport and not enough altitude to reach any alternate runway, Captain Chesley Sullenberger made a decision that would go down in aviation history: land on the icy waters of the Hudson River. In sub-zero temperatures, with rescue boats still on their way, 150 passengers and 5 crew members made it off the aircraft safely and waited for rescue standing on the plane's wings. The captain was the last to leave, after walking the aisle twice to make sure no one had been left behind. Number 9. The plane that lost its roof. Now imagine facing winds over 500 kilometers per hour without even a roof over your head. Not as a metaphor, literally no roof. That's what happened aboard Aloha Airlines Flight 243 in 1988 on a route between the Hawaiian Islands. Once the Boeing 737 had reached cruising altitude, an explosive decompression tore off an entire section of the fuselage, including the roof above the first rows of passengers. In a split second, the inside of the plane became open sky. Passengers were suddenly exposed to extreme cold, nearly 45 degrees below zero, and winds that made any movement impossible. Fortunately, most had kept their seatbelts fastened. One flight attendant who was standing was swept out by the vacuum and was never found. Meanwhile, the crew began a controlled emergency descent and within minutes managed to bring the aircraft down to a safer altitude. The plane landed with a massive hole where part of the fuselage should have been. This event is still studied today in aviation safety courses around the world. Number 8. The airport next to the beach. Some airports are challenging by nature, but few in the world compare to Princess Juliana International Airport on the island of St. Martin in the Caribbean. There, the runway ends almost right on the beach sand. That means large aircraft, including Boeing 747s and Airbus A340s, pass just a few meters over the heads of tourists gathered on Maho Beach. On certain approaches, planes can fly under 10 meters off the ground before touching down. The blast of air from the engines is so intense it knocks people over and sends objects flying, and signs posted on the beach wall warn visitors of the very real danger of death. Even so, or maybe because of it, thousands of people travel specifically to witness these landings. Photographers, aviation enthusiasts, and tourists press up against the wall to feel the force of the engines on their skin. It's one of the most extreme spectacles commercial aviation has to offer, but the margin for error is close to zero, and pilots who fly this route know that better than anyone. Number 7. The plane that lost its nose. In 2017, an aircraft that had departed from Istanbul flew into a hailstorm of an intensity rarely recorded in commercial aviation. What began as moderate turbulence quickly turned into something none of the crew were prepared to see. Hailstones completely destroyed the radome, the aerodynamic nose structure known as the plane's nose, exposing the internal electronics directly to the impact of the storm. The cockpit windows were also compromised, cracking in ways that threatened the pressurization's integrity. With visibility close to zero and instruments partially affected, the captain decided to turn back immediately to the airport of origin. Relying mainly on the instruments that were still working, the crew managed to keep the aircraft stable, line up with the runway, and carry out a controlled approach. Inside the plane, 121 passengers followed every second of the descent without knowing exactly what had happened to the front of the aircraft. When the wheels finally touched down, the relief was immediate, but the state of the aircraft as it came to a stop left everyone in stunned silence. An extraordinary display of skill and composure under conditions that shouldn't have allowed for a safe landing at all. Number 6. The pilot who ended up outside. This story sounds like something out of an action movie, but it really happened, and it's documented in British aviation safety records. 13 minutes after takeoff on British Airways Flight 5390, headed from Birmingham to Spain, the cockpit windshield simply blew out. The pressure difference between the pressurized cabin and the outside air was so violent and instantaneous that Captain Tim Lancaster was partially sucked out of the aircraft. For a moment that felt like an eternity to everyone on board, only his legs remained inside the cockpit. His torso and head were outside at over 5,000 meters, exposed to temperatures and winds no human body could survive for long. While the co-pilot took over the controls and began an emergency descent, a flight attendant held onto the captain's legs with his bare hands to keep him from being fully swept away. The aircraft landed safely at Southampton Airport. Against all odds, Tim Lancaster survived with fractures, hypothermia, and serious injuries, but alive. Months later, he was flying again. The investigation found the incident was caused by windshield bolts that had been installed incorrectly during maintenance carried out just hours before the flight. Number 5. The mysterious cloud of smoke. During a routine international flight, passengers on British Airways Flight 9 began noticing something unsettling: smoke in the cabin and a strange glow around the windows, as if glowing particles were passing straight through the plane. Within minutes, things took a dramatic turn. An intense flash of light enveloped the aircraft, and one by one, all 4 engines of the Boeing 747 shut down. A plane carrying 263 people was now gliding silently over the Indian Ocean, with no engine power and no clear explanation for what was happening. The crew tried restarting the engines again and again, following every emergency procedure available. For several minutes, nothing worked. Then, unexpectedly, one engine came back, then another, then 2 more. With partial power restored, the aircraft managed to reach Jakarta International Airport and land safely, with the windshields completely sandblasted opaque, forcing the pilots to land almost blind. The investigation that followed revealed a culprit: a massive cloud of volcanic ash from Mount Galunggung, completely invisible to the weather radar of the time. Number 4. The Gimli glider. Not every plane is built to glide, but a Boeing 767 carrying 61 people proved that in extreme situations, physics doesn't care what the manufacturer's specifications say. In 1983, Air Canada Flight 143 suffered a catastrophic failure caused by a fueling error, a mix-up between liters and kilograms when calculating how much fuel was needed. At over 12,000 meters, both engines shut down at the same time. With most of the electronic systems losing power and control of the aircraft severely limited, the crew faced a scenario flight simulators rarely recreate with this level of intensity. Captain Robert Pearson, who had glider experience before flying commercial jets, put that skill to decisive use. He remembered an old decommissioned airbase in Gimli, Manitoba that he knew by heart. The plane covered dozens of kilometers in complete silence. No engines, no backup systems, just the sound of the wind, until it lined up with the old runway. What the crew didn't know was that the runway had been partly converted into a racetrack, and there was an event happening there that very day. The aircraft landed without serious injuries, a feat experts still describe today as an improbable combination of exceptional skill and extraordinary luck. Number 3. The landing in the middle of Siberia. In 2010, a Tupolev Tu-154 operated by Alrosa Airlines was flying over one of the most remote and uninhabited regions on the planet when it suffered a total electrical failure. The kind of event aviation manuals classify as unlikely but not impossible. Fuel pumps stopped working, navigation instruments went dark, communication systems dropped offline. The crew was working with almost no information, knowing they had roughly half an hour of fuel left before the engines would shut down too. In a part of Siberia with no cities, no infrastructure, and no obvious alternatives, every minute mattered. That's when the pilot spotted on the map a small, forgotten airstrip near the settlement of Izhma, built decades earlier and nearly abandoned, occasionally used by small local aircraft. The problem was obvious. The runway was under 1.4 kilometers long. A Tu-154 normally needs at least double that distance to stop safely. The crew decided to try anyway. The aircraft ran past the end of the runway, plowed through the vegetation, and finally stopped when the forest blocked its path.
all 72 people on board survived, in a place where, had the plane gone down anywhere along its flight path, it likely wouldn't have been found for a long time.
Number 2. The landing gear that wouldn't come down. Imagine looking out the window during final approach and realizing the front landing gear simply isn't where it should be. It didn't retract wrong, it didn't lock in the wrong position, it just never came down at all. That's exactly the situation faced by the passengers and crew of a flight that had to land without a fully functional nose gear. With the problem confirmed and no technical fix available on board, the pilots spent a considerable amount of time circling the airport, burning off fuel to reduce fire risk on impact, and mentally preparing the crew and passengers for what was coming. The approach was carried out with a level of precision few ordinary landings ever demand. When the plane touched down, the rear landing gear absorbed the initial impact. Then slowly the nose of the aircraft came down and scraped along the runway for several meters, throwing up sparks visible from inside the cabin. The structure held. The plane came to a stop. Everyone got off the aircraft without serious injuries. An outcome the firefighters and emergency crews stationed along the runway honestly weren't sure they'd witness. Number 1. Facing down a hurricane, like attempting a landing in violent, unstable winds, and few videos capture that as clearly as what happened at Hamburg Airport during a powerful storm system. With crosswinds gusting over 120 kilometers per hour, an aircraft began its final approach holding a significant crab angle against the runway, a technique needed to counter the crosswind and stay aligned. The pilots knew the window to land was narrow and that conditions were pushing right up against what the aircraft specifications allowed. Inside the cabin, passengers watching through the windows could already tell something about this approach was different. Just as the landing seemed like it was about to succeed, an unexpectedly powerful gust tipped the aircraft dangerously at the exact moment of touchdown. For one instant captured on the airport's cameras, one of the wings actually scraped the runway. Recognizing immediately that the aircraft was no longer in safe condition to complete the landing, the pilot applied full power and executed a go-around, a maneuver that demands split-second judgment and flawless execution under extreme pressure. After a second approach, the plane finally landed safely. It's the kind of moment that reminds us why pilots spend years training for situations no manual can ever fully describe.
10 moments where everything could have ended completely differently. A river instead of a runway, a plane with no roof, a pilot outside the aircraft, a Boeing 767 gliding silently over Canada. What all these cases have in common isn't luck, it's preparation. Every one of these outcomes came down to pilots who trained for situations they hoped they'd never face, and when the moment came, they were ready. If this video left your heart racing, drop a like. It's quick and it helps the channel grow a ton. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next, because there's a lot more of this kind of story on the way. And let us know in the comments which of these landings blew you away the most. We read every single one.